I'm tuning in here, and you were making believe you were Joe. You were just going crazy, and you're like, "Oh, it's not Joe, by the way." And then that was one of the best opens I ever heard. You just make everyone thought it was Joe because nobody at
Yeah,
that time there was no like announcement who's hosting and whatnot.
yeah, no, I do remember that. I did. I think actually Dove Kramer, who has been the longtime board operator there, told me to do that, and I was like, yeah, all right, I guess, like I'll do it, and it ended up going over really, really well. I think that's the only good idea that Dove Kramer has ever had. As much as I like that guy, but he's not. He's very, very buttoned up.
Buttoned
But
up, he's got his white shirt on, he's eating cereal every day.
right, yeah, exactly. He's a quality control guy. He's not an entertainment guy. But yeah, so that was great at that point. But I remember like back then I wanted to be more than just the guy who did the voices, so I had to prove to people that I could also host a talk show. I could also be funny in other ways. And that was sort of just part of who I was doing the voices. So I remember a lot of that time was like, yeah, I'll do it to make people laugh. But I kind of, this isn't going to last. Like I think about that guy who does that Joey Molinaro, who's so good at those impressions that he does, who works for Barstool now. Like I just saw another one where he was Nick Saban. I was like, wow, I mean, the guy's so talented. But like it gets to a point though where it's like if you're just that guy, like there's only so much of a ceiling. Like, Frank Caliendo got his like own show on TBS. I remember they pumped the hell out of it that one baseball postseason. It did horribly, and that was the end of it. And now he's just basically on Twitter doing Morgan Freeman reads Christmas stories or something, so like at some point, like the impressionist has to have another arsenal or you're just going to be, a hired clown,
All right. Yeah. So you're in Pittsburgh. After 6 months, you become the morning show host, one of the hosts. You guys become number one. You're also doing silent reporting and pregame and postgame for University of Pittsburgh football during 2012 and 2013. Thinking back now, obviously you didn't want to be in Pittsburgh. You wanted to always come back to New York. But what was your time like there?
Oh, it was awesome. I that was a great 5 years. I never thought that I would enjoy it as much as I did. Of course, I was desperate to come home, but the way I looked at that, it was sort of like going to college, like the college that I didn't get in real college because I was too worried about, being a music teacher, for Christ's sakes. So like I learned everything. I mean, I was thrown in all sorts of situations there that I never thought I'd be thrown in, working with guys I didn't necessarily like, dealing with big controversies when a guy I worked with was involved in a DUI hit and run, working for a team, just all the things that come with being the flagship station for a particular organization and them sort of breathing down your neck and how to deal with it. There was just so many things. When I first got there, we had no commercials. Nobody was calling in, no guests. We were just a startup. We were just had flipped from music to sports. And I remember, like starting at 6:00 after the update, I'd go from like 6:01 to 6:19 to 6:21 to 6:39 to 6:41 to 6:58 every hour. So I was like off like, a total of 6 minutes an hour and was talking to myself that entire time with no sports going on. We launched in February 2010. It was 2 weeks after the Super Bowl. The NHL was on Olympic break. There was nothing going on. And that taught you to be a better talk show host. So, I mean, I ended up tearing up my last day there. It was only 5 years, but like it meant so much to me. And some of my best friends are still out there. The guy who does the afternoon show now on 93.7 The Fan's one of my best friends. So that I met my wife out there. So, I mean, that was 5 years. I mean, there was a point where I was like, listen, if it doesn't work out for me, could I live here the rest of my life? Like, yeah, I could. I mean, I would always feel like I didn't fulfill everything I wanted to fulfill, but I could do this here forever. I mean, it's a very livable city. Your dollar goes a long way in Pittsburgh. Like it crossed my mind at one point. That's how much I liked it out there.
Yeah, obviously it helped you with your career, but you met your wife. So huge success, no doubt about it. Now they're going to launch CBS Sports Radio nationally. Does Olivero, does Spitz, do they call you up and they say, hey, we want you to audition for this? Or is it something where they're like, we're thinking of doing this. We're going to bring in Brian Jones. We think he'd be a good fit. How did that opportunity come about?
So, all right. So just a little bit on the details. So CBS Sports Radio launched when I was still in Pittsburgh, still hosting full time. and they had, like, I was doing a weekend show when it launched. Like, I was one of the first people doing a weekend show, so I was not a part of the original lineup. And I think it was 2 full years that they had their original morning show there, which was Brandon Tierney, Tiki Barber, and Dana Jacobson. And it was just a disaster. Like, they didn't get along. Like, obviously Tiki and Tierney had gotten along, but the Dana Brandon relationship wasn't good. So, and it just wasn't what they wanted. So I was doing the weekend show. They liked the weekend show, but I was also doing really well in Pittsburgh. And I was, at that point, I was like, I have to capitalize on my success here. And I want to leave now. Like, much as I enjoyed Pittsburgh, I was like, I got to go now. And my big point was that it wasn't so much wanting to work for CBS Sports Radio. It was getting back in the building. So just like I talked about earlier with Joe and Evan, that producer job, being in front of everybody, I wanted to be in front of everybody again. Like, I didn't want to have like phone call conversations with people and emails. Like, I wanted to be there. So I pushed and pushed and pushed. And they said, listen, we want to make a new morning show. It needs to be more entertaining. And Brian Jones is really entertaining. And we think that you're doing a great job in Pittsburgh. So let's try to put this together. So they called, and I remember flying back there, doing a show with him at night. And they were like, hey, we feel good about this. Let's get it done. So that's how that happened. So that was, I think 2 years after the network had launched, I ended up getting there.
Yeah, Brian Jones is very funny. I loved when you guys had him on WFAN. Now, I thought I don't know if this is when you went to Pittsburgh, when you took the CBS radio gig, but was it true that Mike Francesa told you you're making a huge mistake? Yeah.
So actually, it's funny, both Mike and Craig Carton both thought it was a horrendous idea. So that's like the only thing that they had ever agreed on ever was apparently me coming back from Pittsburgh, because they had the mentality of like, if you're in a local market like that, you can get ratings, you can show your success, you can, you become a local star in that market. Where at CBS Sports Radio, they didn't look so much at ratings. Like, it was sort of just like there for ad dollars and clearance. And like, you really weren't going to get on in a lot of places if you did the morning show there, because people have local morning shows. And I explained to them, I was like, it's really not about about clearance. It's about being back in the building for me. So it was actually so I remember Craig told me it in the newsroom when I came back there for pictures. I had to take pictures. I was in a suit, and I was standing next to Eric Spitz, who was the PD who ran CBS Sports Radio at that time. And Craig said it was the worst mistake I ever made in my career. At Chris McMonigal's wedding, and Mike came up to me and he said, you ruined your career by going to the network. So, hey, looking back on it, I made the right decision. Clearly, because I always said, my line was, if something ever happens at WFAN, I want to be in the building when it happens, because if I'm not flying back and forth from Pittsburgh to try to do shows. I mean, it ended up working out exactly like that, because I was right there down the hall when something happened, and they could put me in and try me out, and it ended up working out great. So I was really, really proud of that decision, because the way I saw it played out exactly the way that I imagined.
You got the mic mush at the wedding. That's pretty funny. So we know the circumstances behind what happened with Craigie in the morning, and why you ultimately ended up 2017 rolls around. They announce you as Craig's replacement. You do your first show with Boomer in January of 2018. You guys have been going strong now for the better part of 3 years. So what was it like at the beginning, knowing that you were going to have to fill in Craig's shoes? Because those were very, very big shoes to fill. Being in that spot for 10 years and having as much success as he did, being the bombastic and very vibrant, loud type of personality that he is. That's kind of the way to also describe your personality. Naturally, when you replace him, you don't want to be a carbon copy replacement of the guy who preceded you. So in your head, what did you feel like you had to do differently in order to stand out in your own way? How is it working with Boomer? Now we're going to get into the exciting part where we're going to have Boomer stories follow here. But I just wanted to get your mindset of replacing Craig, doing different things than him. standing out in your own way, etc.?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that helped me in a big way was that, I hadn't listened to their show, and this is no knock on them, but because I was on the air in the morning, the same time that they were on the air, I hadn't really listened to them from a day-to-day basis. So out in Pittsburgh, starting from 2010 until all the way I was in CBS Sports Radio, up until 2017, I was doing morning drive for a majority of their run. So what I had remembered from them was the hour or two that I would listen when I was producing Joe and Evan, where they were on before us. So it was sort of a strange thing, because, and I think that helped, because if I was a diehard listener to that show, then I feel like I would have handled things differently. So I just went in clean slate, whatever it is. And I honestly, I didn't think about what Craig did. And it wasn't so much intentionally. It was just sort of what's the point of that? The thing that I thought of more than anything is, how do I make it work with Boomer? Not try to be more like Craig or less like Craig. Or I that never entered my mind. What entered my mind was, how can I make this work with Boomer? And the biggest challenge was, because Boomer had those several months, whatever that was, I guess September through when we started that January, he was running the show. And, with him and Jerry, he was taking all the calls. He was coming out of the breaks, and he turned into quarterback mode, where he was making all the calls, and you go here, you go there, you go, I'm going to save this thing. That was his mode. So when I came in, he was still doing that a lot. And it wasn't a partnership. It was more I was riding sidecar in the beginning. And I knew all right, this can't work this way, but I also can't be too this is my thing and I need to be a partner in this. So I had to slowly work my way through every day, trying to get just a little bit more of a 50-50 partnership without, making him worried that I was going to blow the thing up. So that was the toughest thing. There's a lot of people in this business that have type A personalities and, are super overconfident. I'm not one of those guys. I feel like I have a lot of self-awareness, and I'm never the person who is overly confident. So there's many guys that they could have put in that chair that I believe it would have blown up in a couple of months, because they would have said, this is my shot. I'm doing this. I don't care. Blah, blah, blah. But I said, okay, listen, we've got a great foundation here. And all these people have worked on this number one show for a very long time. And what I want to do is I want to come in, I want to keep it rolling in that direction. And then eventually, there'll be things where it becomes also my thing. But right now it's not. I had to recognize, right now it's their thing, and I'm becoming a part of it. So that's why I really wanted to make more of an emphasis on, getting Jerry and Al and Eddie and all that more involved, to be sort of familiar with the listener, and also, doing it in a way where Boomer also felt comfortable. So I think that the worst possible advice when you're replacing someone who had as much success as Craig is to think about what they did. Because if you're doing that, you're overthinking it. He wasn't there. I was the one who had to figure it out. So yeah, it was tough for sure. And that's another thing that I am proud of is recognizing that situation and saying, all right, if you go balls to the wall in this spot, it's not going to work. You got to lay back. Now, luckily, I was afforded more time than what happened in the afternoons. The afternoons there, they didn't Mike came back. It was a mess. So I felt like I had time. I felt like they trusted me, and I was able to build over 6 months, over a year, to get it to where I wanted to get it. And now it's exactly where I always imagined it. But it takes time, especially with a big, Boomer is a large personality. You know what I'm saying?
And he's also a large dude.
Yeah, right. When you sit next to him, it's a big deal. So it was very, very difficult, but very much worth it. And then Boomer also is a guy that he's everything that you see of him is what he is. He's just that great of a guy, that supportive, always had your back, all of those things. So that also made me feel comfortable that I had time to kind of weave my way through this and build the thing block by block.
Yeah, I think Boomer is great. I used to always appreciate